So the topic of the day is contextual intelligence in KM. And what I will do is I will cover the topic in about 30-40 minutes so that you can type in your questions and we can take up those questions in the later part of the presentation. So moving into the topic itself, I'm sure context is a word you have heard a lot about in the last few years. So over the course of this presentation, I will give you an idea of what context is, what are some of the reasons why it has become so important today. And towards the end, I will also present a couple of case studies on how in Mindtree we have attempted to design and roll out contextual systems. So that will be saved for the end. But to begin with, what is context? Let's try and understand that in a little more detail. We live in an age where there is an overdose of information, knowledge is all over the place, but knowledge by itself does not mean anything unless it is put into context, unless, as Steve Jobs said, we are able to connect the dots and make sense out of these various pieces of knowledge. It doesn't help us in practically taking the right course of action. Context provides relevance. There is something that we want to say. However, there is something that the person wants to listen or wants to consume. And often we don't look at that side of the story sufficiently, which is ironical since we want all the things that we design to be relevant for the user. So relevance is a very important aspect of context. Context also provides meaning. If you look at any word, by itself it doesn't mean anything. And the best example of this would be the Google search. Now, if you were to search for apple, it could either mean the company or it could mean the fruit. Similarly, if you look at any word, by itself it is very difficult to infer its context, but once the context is known, there is deeper meaning that is available to the user. Most importantly, context is about the user. If you look at any manifestation of contextual implementations or contextual design, the user is always the center of such a design. The various fields in which contextual design is applied today ranges from selling or advertising or marketing. So you have the idea of contextual selling. You have the idea of contextual design and contextual inquiry, which is really to understand the user and then do design as per that. And often, this relates to product design. And in the area of knowledge management, this applies to contextual learning and contextual knowledge design. But the common thread between all these multiple things is the fact that the user is the center. And that is where we begin. Let me share a little bit of historical perspective. Nature by itself is diverse. No two people, no two animals, no two vegetables are exactly the same. They are unique. Their needs, their wants are different and unique. So where did this whole idea of, as we call it, one size fits all come in? Historically speaking, a lot of this happened during the Industrial Revolution, where the focus was on the use of technology to mass produce the same thing with the objective of reduced cost, greater scale, greater reach, greater efficiency. So these were some of the drivers. And example of this would be a factory where a certain thing was manufactured and everything was built to manufacture that thing in a much better way, and then of course to mass produce, mass distribute that one thing. This was all right in the early years when the user did not have choice. The fact that I was able to get the product by itself meant a lot to the user. But progressively, the user has become more nuanced. This is probably the classic manifestation of the one-size-fits-all model. This particular photograph is from the Charlie Chaplin classic Modern Times. And what you see here is nothing but a parody on Ford's assembly line model. And you can see that the attempt here is to mass produce the one thing and create efficiency to enable that to happen in a much, much better way. But this was not only restricted to the area of factories and product design. This manifested itself into various aspects of life. So even if you look at the organization today, you can see that the fundamental notion of centrally mass producing one thing and making that available to majority of users is still very strong. If you look at quality processes, the whole idea of having standard processes stems from that. Similarly, the whole idea of a central curriculum which is disseminated by a teacher in the form of that also definitely has the same design behind it. And this is a very interesting diagram that you see here. This is actually a picture from a classroom from medieval Europe, and you can see that nothing much has changed. If you look more closely, you'll find a lot of students in the back rows either talking to each other or dozing off, and this is an example of how if we don't look at the user's context, the user may be disengaged. So what's the progression of context? Context began with one size fits all, but over a period of time, it manifested into having multiple variants. So these are typically products like, say, the Diet Pepsi, which is meant for a certain kind of consumer, or let us say a sports car model of a certain car. So while there were still limitations, but you tried to create multiple variants which allowed you to create a more contextual, a more personalized product. But of course, this is not the ideal scenario. The ideal scenario would be complete personalization, where the user gets exactly what he or she wants. This has been attempted by certain organizations if we look at the world of product design. Like, for example, IKEA, the company that manufactures home products, they came up with this concept of allowing a certain degree of personalization, and they created the entire supply chain to enable that, which led to their success, where you could actually customize or personalize your furniture to a certain degree. There are other examples as well. I think in common life in India, the other example that we would have come across is, let us say, the Asian Paints model, where you can actually choose a very nuanced color from the palette. And Asian Paints has done that very innovatively, where they have actually created those codes. And if you go to the local retail outlet, based on the proportions from the basic primary colors, they are able to give you that exact personalized choice. However, this has its limitations, primarily I would say due to technology, but that is beginning to change today. Of course, in the IT world, the advances in the field of analytics, machine learning are enabling us to design contextual systems. But even in the manufacturing world, ideas like 3D printing, once they come into being, will definitely revolutionize this whole aspect of personalizing a product as per a user's needs. So why is context so relevant or important nowadays? One is the fact that technology allows it. The other is the fact that you have more demanding users. They are willing to pay more. They don't want to spend as much time. The demands of productivity are also a lot higher than what it was before. So the user wants exactly something that is relevant for them. The world is also getting more complex. The amount of information that is getting generated year on year is staggering, and it is far more than what has been generated historically. The world is also becoming more interconnected, primarily through devices coming into the picture, which means that the need for context has become a lot higher. A lot of work that we do is becoming more interdisciplinary, so things are becoming a lot more interconnected, and hence, in the middle of all this, the user is saying, what's in it for me? Give me exactly what I want. And that is why the whole idea of context has become so important in today's world. And many people say that we actually live in the age of context. Moving on, what are the different elements of context? This is represented a little simplistically here as the 4 W's: who, what, when, where. Now, what does who mean? Typically, the identity in an organizational context, usually that refers to the role that someone is playing. What refers to the activity. So at one point in time, I'm interested in doing a certain activity, which is based on a certain outcome. Either I want to achieve something, or in some cases I want to become something. So that also provides context, where definitely that is important. In the world of devices, often this refers to location. That is, can you show me the restaurants around where I am located right now? These kind of apps are very common in today's mobile world. However, in an organizational context, more than physical location, it may refer to the stage in my journey. Let us say if there is an organizational process that the user is going through, which is typically called the workflow. Depending on where the workflow a person is, that becomes an important element of context. And of course, last but not the least, when, which refers to the stage of my journey. So these are the broad elements. Of course, this is a bit of a simplistic model. But the idea is, how can we infer a user's context based on these 4 W's and provide something which is relevant and meaningful to the user? Often that is the aim of contextual systems. Now, moving specifically to contextual knowledge, these, I believe, are the actors in a contextual knowledge system. The center naturally is the user, because that is the essence of developing a contextual system. But the user is typically supported by 2 elements. The system, and today, of course, we tend to equate, and Definitely that is an important element of it. But I would also like to bring another actor, that is the coach. And depending on the user's context, the coach would be the user's reporting manager or teacher or facilitator. That is somebody who knows the user very well, who knows what the user wants to achieve. So you can actually map it back to the 4 Ws. Who knows at what stage in the journey is the user in, and where is the user located. So based on all these things, the coach and the system together provide information and knowledge which enables the user to take the right action, to make the right decisions. So that is the essence of a contextual knowledge system. But I would still represent the user as the center of that. But typically a user sometimes struggles to decide on the right course of action due to multiple reasons. And this is where a contextual system can provide clarity. Because sometimes I may not know exactly what I want to achieve. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? So the user may not have all the information. And the coach, of course, can provide this information, based on the relationship he or she has with the user. And the system also plays a powerful role here because the system can enable the user to connect to a larger knowledge base. Otherwise, the user and the coach are restricted by their own experiences, by their own patterns. However, a system can tap into knowledge that exists outside, and as a user begins to use a system increasingly, and the system begins to recognize the patterns of a user, the system can begin to throw knowledge which becomes more and more contextual as time goes by. So these are the elements. As I share a couple of examples, I think this should become a little clearer. But again, the intent is to provide very relevant, meaningful, clear information to the user to enable that person to decide on the best course of action. And typically, what is said is, when I have access to multiple perspectives and data points in a very contextual, relevant way, so I'll talk about 2 examples. The first one being an example of contextual learning, and the second one being an example of contextual knowledge. The diagram that you see here is Mindtree's Global Learning Center, which is located in Bhubaneswar, and it was spread over 20 acres, and 500 learners can live and learn here at one point in time. Now, one of the ideas that we have brought into the design of various learning initiatives in the Global Learning Center is that of immersive learning. And here, what we do is allow the learners to pick up various problems from the campus. And these problems can vary from managing energy, managing water, managing waste, managing security, managing accommodation, managing learning in the campus. And these are various problems that the user can work on. And what the learners do, Mindtree being an IT company, is they use a lot of IT technology, largely digital technologies, to create the right solutions for these problems. Now, why is this relevant to contextual learning? Because as you go deeper into it, and these are various examples of the kind of projects people work on, what we do is we pair up the user or the learner with a coach who is a senior practitioner from Mindtree who is there to assist and guide the user. Now that particular person has been, through similar situations in life and has past experience and hence understands the context of the problem. That person also understands the context of the user as he or she begins to work with that person over a period of time. And based on that, that person can provide the best course of action. The approach is similar to the flipped classroom model where the problem or the project becomes the center and the user is then provided with learning resources to learn whatever is required to solve that problem. So this is the exact reversal of the classic classroom model where you provide a lot of learning content without any context, and hence that tends to be less effective and less useful because the user does not see it as being relevant and does not see it as being meaningful. On the other hand, when you give problems or these kind of situations in front of the learner, immediately you're providing context and hence providing relevance and meaning and hence making the whole experience much more fruitful and valuable. We are also exploring the concept of adaptive learning because here I just spoke to you about the coach. If you go back to the diagram where I showed the three actors, you can definitely see that the learner here is the user and the coach is the practitioner who supports the user. But what about the system? Now that is where we are working on the learning management system and seeing how it can provide better context at a simple needs to learn for that problem to be solved, but at a more nuanced level based on the system actually suggests learning content. Buzz in the learning world, and some of you would be familiar with the concept of adaptive assessments based on your responses to an objective type test. Subsequent questions are tailored as per that. In a sense, this is the extension of that concept into the area of learning, and based on your past patterns of learning, the system suggests what you should be learning. So through this, you're able to provide a very contextual learning experience to the user. Moving on, the other example is that of contextual knowledge. And here let me share a little story. This is something that was popularized in the book called The Design of Everyday Things. And this was about how people recognize coins. Apparently, many countries, whenever new coins were introduced, it was a little counterintuitive as to what worked for the user and what didn't. And there is a particular story about a new franc that was introduced. And what happened was, even though this coin was very, very different from other coins that existed, most users confused this particular franc with other coins that existed in the past. And stopped, and the coin had to be pulled back from production. So this was a very interesting story, and a lot of people have been researching similar things. And what they've inferred is that people, just store the minimum amount of knowledge that they need in order to achieve a certain task. So let us say if I have a bunch of coins in my purse, they just remember certain things about it. Let us say the color of the coin, or let us say the texture of the coin, or how large a coin is, things like that. And this is happening at a very subconscious level, and they use that to pick the right coin. And of course, from the perspective of user design, people have taken that to actually design the most intuitive coins, so that you can easily differentiate between various denominations without any confusion. The interesting learning here that I wanted to bring out was the fact that people may be consuming a lot of knowledge, we may be providing a lot of content or knowledge to people, but they are storing only the minimum amount of knowledge that is required to do their job. And this is something that I have seen in various learning initiatives in Mindtree. For example, we did a detailed study of our project management training, and what we saw is that the program is great, the feedback is great, people find it very relevant, but on the job, we are still not seeing the necessary action. And when we go deeper into it, what we realize is that even though we are providing a lot of knowledge and content, people are just storing the minimum amount of knowledge that they need to do their job. And unless we tackle, so to say, the last mile of content consumption in a good way, and I would say in a contextual way, I don't think we will be able to, bring about the right change in behavior where the right action is being exhibited on the ground. So this is where we've spent some time exploring how we can provide contextual content to people, that is based on the 4 W's, based on what the user is doing. We provide small bites of content rather than big bites of learning, and they consume it in a very contextual way. When it's relevant for them, they are able to infer greater meaning out of it, and hence they are able to take a more appropriate or better course of action. This is the model that we have arrived at. There are various models that are out there. So we have actually created this model where, since we have been largely focusing on projects that we execute, we look at that project from the standpoint of characteristics and situations. And we have created a repository of such characteristics and situations from past projects as well. And based on the profile of the user and based on the activity that he or she performs, we look at various characteristics and situations to suggest the right information to the user so that the user can take a better course of action. These are various characteristics and situations that we have listed. This is not an absolute list. But you can see that you look at the profile of the user, various characteristics, situations, and through that you're trying to suggest the best possible content for the user. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and I'm open for questions. The interesting thought that many people have, the literature from a lot of futurists, that at some point in time, the system will actually know so much about a person, about past patterns, and will be able to connect it with the larger knowledge base that exists in the world, and hence will almost kind of supersede the user in decision making. But that is something that is open for debate. But with that, I will open up the floor for questions, and we'll take up these questions.